My name is Lauren, and I'm 28 years old. My parents built their empire on the backs of people like me, quietly capable, constantly overlooked, and never once invited to the table where the real decisions were made. I was the daughter they kept in the background, the one they introduced at family dinners with a polite smile and a vague title. Lauren works in finance, as if saying anything more specific might give me too much credit. My father, Richard, had spent 30 years building a commercial real estate empire worth over $275 million. My mother, Diana, had spent those same 30 years making sure the right people knew about it. And somewhere in the middle of all that, I had become invisible. It started 3 weeks before the gala. My father had been putting together the biggest deal of his career, a mixed-use development project spanning 4 city blocks, backed by a consortium of institutional investors he had been courting for 2 years. The annual gala was supposed to be the final handshake, black tie, ballroom, the kind of event where fortunes are sealed over champagne and carefully rehearsed conversations. I had attended every year since I was 19, not as a guest, really, more as decoration, the dutiful daughter in the corner, smiling on cue. Then the text came from my mother, short, blunt, the way she always communicated things she didn't want to explain. Formal event, best you skip this year, this isn't your world. I read it twice. Then I read it a third time just to make sure I hadn't misunderstood. I hadn't. A second message followed almost immediately. Dad's new investors will be there, black tie. We need everything to go perfectly. What she meant, what she always meant, was that I was a liability, not polished enough, not the version of our family she wanted on display. I was the daughter who had taken a job at a mid-size asset management firm instead of joining the family business, the one who asked uncomfortable questions on Sunday dinners, the one who had once told my father, directly, that one of his development deals had a structural debt problem he was ignoring. He hadn't spoken to me for 2 weeks after that. Turned out I was right. He never acknowledged it. I didn't argue with my mother. I didn't reply with anger or hurt feelings typed out in a message she would screenshot and show my father as proof that I was difficult. I said nothing. I simply didn't go. I stayed in my apartment that Friday evening, ordered dinner, and tried not to think about the fact that my own parents had looked at their guest list, a room full of strangers in rented tuxedos, and decided I didn't belong there. I was 2 bites into my food when my phone rang. My father. I almost didn't answer, but something, instinct maybe, or just old habit, made me pick up. He wasn't calling to apologize. He wasn't calling to say he'd made a mistake. He was calling because something had gone wrong, and the way he said my name, tight, almost strangled, told me it was serious. The gala was already underway. The investors were there, the champagne was poured, and then, somewhere between the appetizers and the keynote, his lead investor, a man named Harlan Briggs, who managed a private equity fund with more zeros than most people see in a lifetime, had stopped the conversation, looked around the room, and said 4 words my father clearly hadn't been prepared for. "We need your daughter." My father's voice on the phone was a mixture of confusion and barely concealed panic. About what, he had apparently said to Harlan right there in the ballroom in front of everyone. And Harlan had looked at him with the calm, measured expression of a man who does not repeat himself, and said, "The debt restructuring analysis on the Meridian block. We've seen her work, Richard. We've been following her for months. We don't move forward without her in the room." My father didn't know what to say. He had built his entire career on being the smartest person present, and his own daughter, the one he had quietly uninvited 3 weeks ago, had apparently already walked into that room without ever showing up.
I sat with the phone against my ear for a long moment after my father finished speaking. He hadn't apologized. He hadn't said, "I was wrong to exclude you," or "Your mother and I made a mistake." What he said was, "Can you come?" Just that. 3 words, clipped and transactional. The way he spoke to contractors and consultants, not to his daughter. But I had learned a long time ago that with my father, that was sometimes the closest thing to vulnerability you were ever going to get. And honestly, it wasn't even about him anymore. Harlan Briggs had been following my work. That meant something far bigger than one evening in a ballroom. I changed in 11 minutes. Black dress, simple heels, the kind of understated professional look that says I didn't need 2 hours to prepare because I was already ready. I had been ready for years. I took the folder I kept on my home desk, the one with my independent analysis of the Meridian Block project that I had completed 3 months ago, purely out of habit, because my brain doesn't stop working just because I'm not invited to participate, and I put it under my arm. I called a car. I didn't tell my father I was coming. I just came. The ballroom was exactly what I expected. Tall ceilings, low lighting, the kind of orchestrated elegance that costs more per hour than most people earn in a month. I walked in through the side entrance, and the first person who saw me was my mother. Her expression moved through several stages in about 2 seconds. Surprise, calculation, and then something that almost looked like relief, though she would never have admitted it. She said nothing. She stepped aside. That, from Diana, was practically a standing ovation. Harlan Briggs was exactly as I had imagined from reading about him. Mid-60s, silver-haired, the kind of man who listens more than he speaks and charges accordingly. He was standing with 2 members of his team near the far end of the room when I approached, and the moment he saw me, he extended his hand with the quiet confidence of someone who had been expecting me all evening. "Lauren," he said, not "you must be Lauren" or "Richard's daughter," just my name, like I had already earned it. We moved to a private room off the main hall. Harlan, his 2 senior analysts, my father, and me. My mother hovered near the doorway for a moment and then disappeared. The conversation began, and within 4 minutes I understood exactly why Harlan had stopped the gala to ask for me. His team had been reviewing my father's Meridian Block proposal, and they had flagged the same debt layering issue I had raised at that Sunday dinner 18 months ago, the one that had earned me 2 weeks of silence. The mezzanine financing structure my father had insisted on was creating a compounding exposure risk that would surface in year 3 of the development cycle. Harlan's team had modeled it 6 different ways. Every model told the same story. They needed someone who understood the asset deeply enough to propose a restructure that preserved the deal without dismantling the equity split. I opened my folder. I walked them through my analysis, the one I had done alone at my kitchen table on a Tuesday night 3 months ago, simply because the problem had been sitting in my head and I needed to think it through. Harlan's lead analyst looked at my projections for a long moment, then looked at Harlan and said quietly, "This is exactly what we needed." Harlan nodded slowly. My father sat across from me and said nothing. I could feel him recalibrating in real time, not just the deal, but everything. The years of "she works in finance," the polite vagueness, the uninvitations, all of it restructuring itself in his mind the way a balance sheet corrects when you finally enter the numbers you had been leaving out. The deal moved forward. Harlan's consortium committed before midnight, $275 million, anchored by a restructuring plan drafted at a kitchen table by the daughter who hadn't been invited to the room. My father walked me to the car afterward. He didn't say much. He put his hand briefly on my shoulder, just for a second, and said, "You should have been here from the beginning." It wasn't a full apology, but from Richard, it was everything. I drove home that night thinking about all the rooms I had been kept out of and how none of them had actually been able to keep me out. Not really, because the work speaks. It always speaks. You can uninvite a person from a gala. You cannot uninvite their competence from the conversation. And that night, in a ballroom that was never supposed to have my name in it, my name was the only one that mattered. If this story moved something in you, if you have ever been the person left off the list, talked over in the meeting, quietly sidelined by the people who were supposed to believe in you the most, then you already know that the most powerful thing you can do is keep building, keep working, keep that folder on your desk, because the room always comes around. And when it does, you want to be the one walking in with the answer they couldn't find without you. Subscribe to this channel because every week we bring you stories exactly like this one.